how do you define culture? Because I think it's a very typical thing to only define culture with your values. But at the end of the day, the values doesn't really matter if it doesn't come out in sort of behaviors, right?
Sure.
You can easily see values like you want to be innovative, but it doesn't mean anything unless your behavior actually backs that up. So how do you define culture?
Sure.
Just start there then.
Sure, that's a good question. For me, I think the culture is the collective behavior of the group. So whatever the group is, the company, the team, whatever. So I think that's the very short part, right? I like to think that culture in an entrepreneurial setting is the insurance policy I have that things work when I'm not there.
Exactly.
If you have the right culture, it means people are operating, if you will, think of them as machines. It sounds cold, right? But that the default behavior of people is in line with what you would expect.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that people mistake is that they take culture as being free sushi because they heard that's what the case at Google, right? That's nothing to do with culture. So culture is often either something that happens naturally or it can be engineered.
Yeah.
And I think many people mistakenly just take it for granted that it's like it is, or it's free sushi and we can't afford that.
Yeah.
But all of those are symptoms of something deeper.
Yeah. Culture could also be explained that it's what people are doing when they know that no one is watching them, right? So when they're alone, what are they actually doing? That sort of like gets to the culture. But so in Nova, where we're sitting here in London right now, you actually taken upon you to write a culture book. Can you give us the insight behind the idea of writing it, and why is it necessary to write a culture book? And then we'll dive more into that. But
yeah, so we decided to, Mads and I, Mads my partner in this, and I started by sitting down and writing down the core principles we believe in. We wanted to do that because we wanted to create awareness among ourselves about what are the actual principles, but also wanted to make sure we aligned.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can look at something and you realize, look, we never thought about it this way. And the big challenge with culture as a company scales is that it ends up being so intangible that nobody really knows.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to do is we wanted to write these things down because it also makes it easier for us to communicate it towards people working here. What are our expectations? Also towards people who are going to work here or not going to work, or people we speak with, say, look, if you were to join, this is what it's like.
Yeah.
So we wanted to have something which is more than just the values people put on the wall. And I think we wanted to make sure that these principles, as they call them, very much inspired by Italia.
Yeah, exactly.
We wanted to make sure that they are, to some extent, controversial. Not necessarily controversial in a provocative sense, but controversial in the sense that you need to be able to disagree with them.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than all these values people have where the opposite never makes sense.
No. Like not being innovative or not being on the forefront. It doesn't make any sense to not be that, right?
Exactly. I mean, people saying, oh, we want to make sure we do this, we want to do that. It's like, yeah, okay, great, but let's move on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we wanted to make sure that there's a number of things here, like we are super direct, for example, to the extent that people working here, and that's not just that one, but all of our principles, I think people working here either hate it or love it. I think if you ever meet someone who's worked with us before, they either loved it or they absolutely had dreaded it.
Yeah.
And I think that's completely fine. We'd rather want to be the perfect place for the 10% than the average place for the 80%.
Exactly.
And I think for us, being more articulate about what our culture was important.
Yeah.
But it also means we can align people's expectations, right? So what is it we expect of people?